We'll share that and Azai. And then the Chavra that are joining us online will be able to. Okay. So, Rabbi Sai, we left off last time pretty much wrapping up the beginning of Pekida, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is like coming and telling us, yeah, that's connected. That's good. Yeah. Where it's the beginning of the Pekida, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is reawakening, Klal Yisrael, shaking us out of he's not enough for Kumi. Wake up, time to understand that something is going on in the world. And we explained that in the beginning of the fifth parak, Shir Hashirim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes, called it the fake, Pischili Achasira Yasi Tamasi Yanasi. Klal Yisrael then says, "No, I can't do this," and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu kind of sneaks his hand in, like, "Hey," and then eventually we start to get up, but then there's this cat and mouse game where we are chasing after HaKadosh Baruch Hu and it's difficult to find him. But the pasuk continues in Shir Hashirim that Hinei about Midalegal Harim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is jumping over the mountains. That's the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is seen as being Midaleg. He's skipping over things. Now, this should immediately have some associations to the idea of Pesach in general, because Pesach is where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is jumping over things,
passing over,
right?
If you will.
So maybe passing over, maybe jumping over. It's Machlokes and Rashi. We'll probably get that at some point, a little bit closer to
It's
Pesach.
not called jumping over.
Well, it might be. It might be. It might Daf could be the opposite. Rav Kook makes the argument that from the Haftarah from last week, Ad Matai Atem Poschem Al Shtei Seifim, that Eliyahu challenges the Nevi'ei Baal, or the Jews that are like wavering in between. He says, "For how long are you going to be Pesach Al Shtei Seifim? Are you going to be hovering on these two options? Either you're like a Baal guy or you're a God guy, but you can't have it both ways." So Rav Kook points out that the lashon of Pesach means to hover over. But either which way, the idea of Geulah has this idea of jumping over, that it is sequential, but like skipping steps. We're skipping steps in the process of Geulah, and the question is, what exactly does that mean? There's some step skipping that's going on here. And the Ramchal is going to explain to us what this means. What does it mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is midaleg, that is skipping things over, that is jumping over things? And he tells us there's a lot of very, very important, relevant, applicable things for the world right now, the world of the last few hundred years, and for us, Lemaisa, today. So he says, I'm going to explain to you a big secret, what happens at the time of this reawakening. Here comes the voice of my beloved jumping over the mountains, which is in the second parak of Shir Hashirim. It says, this is an immensely deep, profound, great secret. Meaning, Shir Hashirim is revealing secrets here to us, if we know how to read it. Says Ramchal, I'll teach you how to read. Says, we explained that the Pekida is from the world of Yesod. That's the world that we spoke about a few weeks ago, the world of Yesod, which is energetic and enthusiastic and masculine and taking responsibility and standing up for what you believe in, even if you don't know what you believe in. That's the world of Yesod, meaning it came from that flash of inspiration, and it descends into that world of like, I have an idea, I'm gonna go ahead with it. It's excited, it's entrepreneurial, it's let's go. However, he says, but Zechira, that fully fleshed out idea of total redemption that we are still going to be discussing, we're going to discuss with Pesach Tam, that idea comes from Tiferes, that comes from a much greater wholesomeness, a unification of all the disparate aspects of our personalities, of our personality traits, of our different feelings, ideas, ideologies, all of that coalescing into something cohesive, something unified. That's Tiferes. So v'higia zman Pekida, but when the Pekida comes, when it comes time well above Yesod. And Yesod is like, let's go and and then Yesod, that idea of let's do something, enters into a world that's beketz hachoshech. That's in a world of total darkness. The note that I have here is it says it feels like there's no awakening there, right? When the Yesod, how's it going? When Yesod emerges, it's coming mamish out of nowhere. That when the Jewish people started coming back to Eretz Yisrael, so that was Midas HaYesod, like let's go and build a country. The Tiferes, that very deep, profound unification of ideas, ideology, thoughts, theories, and feelings, all of that was invisible. Like it didn't look like there was anything that was like, it looked like people were building the land. It looked like there was something going on, but like it did not look like there was something religious. It did not look like there was anything spiritual that was happening.
Well, it's not like that initial blast of like energy. It's like the actual work that has to get done.
Right.
It seems more mundane, I guess.
Right. So I mean that the work that was happening, that like spark of entrepreneurial spirit, that was absolutely. I mean, in that was, says the Ramchal, is hidden this very, very deep and profound Tiferes, but hidden. I mean, when that Yesod comes to fruition, when that activity begins to occur, you can't see any of the light behind it. It's just like dudes doing stuff. They're like, "What are you doing?" No, we have to do this. Why? It doesn't feel cohesive. It doesn't feel well thought out. It doesn't feel inspired.
Describing the grind.
Yeah. So this is the grind on a national level, which is like we have to do something. It doesn't make sense. I mean, we can't even necessarily even explain it to ourselves, but we feel inspired to do it. But we can't see that inspiration. It's like a sense of driven almost to a purpose that doesn't feel like we have the ability to contain. And people with deep eyes to see will know that this is Tiferes here, that this is coming from that world of unity and cohesiveness and spirituality and deep purpose, even though you only see the surface of it. You only see the activity. And that's true even for the people that are deeply invested in that activity. He says, I'm telling you that when you see this, you should know that Tiferes is behind this, that there's a cohesiveness and a unity that's occurring. He says, Amar kol dadi, the voice of my beloved. The voice of my beloved is that inner voice of the Rebbeinu Shalom echoing through the world. That's the voice of Tiferes. That is imperceivable, that our radio waves are not well attuned to picking up. He says, Perish Shemas ani es kol dadi. Shlomo Melech says, I hear the voice of my beloved. But if you hear something, hearing something means you're hearing from a distance. Kol dadi hinei zeba, I hear it coming. That's very different from having a conversation. That's very different from like communication one-on-one, face-to-face. Kol dadi, the voice of my beloved, hinei zeba, it is coming. Meaning I hear the voice coming. This is long before you notice that the dod is coming, that the beloved is coming. You hear something, it's distant. What can you feel? What can you see? What you can see is activity, is some action, stuff is happening. Valav amra hinei zeba, behold it is coming, midaleg el harim, skipping over the mountains, mikafetz al hagvahos, jumping on the peaks, on the hilltops. Meaning there's some kind of skipping of steps that's occurring. So there's this deep background, like theme that's occurring, imperceivable. If you know that it's there, good. You still can't see it. But there's some jumping that's occurring. So there's an awakening. There's people are doing stuff. Activity is occurring. Midalegal harim. But there's some skipping that's going on. What's the skipping? So he says we should take note of a differentiation between Pesach and the Geulah in the future. What he's told us so far throughout the Sefer is that Pesach is the blueprint for the future. That which happened in Yetzias Mitzrayim will happen again. The same rolling out, the same blueprint is going to happen in the future. The same way that you have Pekida and then Zechira, you're going to have Pekida and then Zechira. And we've mentioned outside. What'd you say?
No, it's not like apples to apples. It's not like the mock-ups are coming back.
Well, in the sense that there is the natural progression of Geulah and then the supernatural progression of Geulah. Both of those things are going to occur. So, but there is a difference. And the difference is called out by the Navi already. The Navi calls out what's going to be different. It says, by Mitzrayim it says, Ve'avar Hashem lingofes Mitzrayim, that Hashem is going to pass through to attack the Egyptians. He says, Upasach Hashem lapetach, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu jumps over the Pesach. He's jumping over the doorways. It says, Ki biyos Mitzrayim melei agilulim v'shikutzim, because Mitzrayim is filled with avodah zarah, is filled with impurities, with idol worship, with licentiousness, with disgusting things. Lo ta'amoid ba hakedusha harbe. The kedusha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, is not going to rest there extensively. This is going to be like a hit and run. That's what's going to be happening in Mitzrayim. And if you've seen any of it's an amazing thing. We had Dr. Tovia Book was here a couple of weeks ago. Spoke at the Millers. So he is a field medic in Gaza at the moment, active duty field medic. He was in America for a short period of time, and he showed us some clips of the helicopter evacuation missions, and they do this 24/7. Meaning, anytime a soldier gets injured, they have troops on the ground, medical troops on the ground that are there to stabilize the patient. And they literally hand them off like hand to hand, preparing the medical evacuation unit for everything that they need. There's a special unit called 669 that lands 24/7, often in the cover of pitch dark, lands, picks up wounded soldiers and gets them to medical care like within like an hour. Like, it's amazing, which is why Baruch Hashem, there's been 248 soldiers that have been killed. It's far too many. But if not for the heroic efforts of these medics and the evacuation teams, Rahman would be a lot more. So they land, mamish, they drop into Gaza. Within 15 to 20 seconds, they're out. That's it. Like, it's like instantaneous. Says Ramchal, that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu is airlifting us out. That's what's going on in Mitzrayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is jumping over. Pasach Hashem al Pasach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is like in, out. Says ki rak derech ha'avara midei bayat teitze miyad. The moment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu arrives, so he says, all of the doors of all of the homes that the Jewish people are in, Sham hayisa de legas hakadusha v'shar ala pesach v'emedes sham lefi sha'ah. That's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu landed. So this is the idea that the word Pesach means both to hop over, but also to hover. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is being Pesach on the houses, meaning he's jumping over the Egyptian houses and landing on the Jewish houses. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is resting in Jewish homes, but home by home.
I thought it was the opposite. Passing over the Jewish homes.
So the wave of destruction is passing over the Jewish homes because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is resting in the Jewish homes.
Is it the same word?
You said hovering, it made me think because in the Bereshit it says Ruach Elohim.
That's merachefes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm questioning.
It is not the same word, but it is very closely the same theme.
Okay.
The Medrash Rabbah explains that pasuk, Ruach Elohim merachefes al pnei hamayim, there's probably hundreds of midrashim on that pasuk, but one of the midrashim, Medrash Rabbah, that Vohu, Choshech al pnei tahom. There's four things. Tohu is Galus Bavel, that's Babylonian exile. Bohu is Persian exile. Choshech, darkness, is Greek exile, and al pnei tahom, the face of the deep, that is the Roman exile, which we are still currently in. V'ruach Elokim merachefes al pnei hamayim, and the spirit of Hashem is hovering above the water. Says the Medrash, Rucha shel Mashiach. That's Mashiach that is hovering. Hasn't landed yet.
It's kind of cool that we have holidays for each of those three.
Yes.
3 or 4? I thought there were 4.
We're in the
Well,
Oh.
so
Yes.
sort of, because Mitzrayim is not counted as one of those 4.
no, but Hanukkah Purim.
Chanukah, Purim, but
Yes, serious.
It's Bavel.
so to a large extent, Purim is the celebration of the defeat of Bavel. Because by Purim, Bavel ends, but Persia does not. And that the Maharal explains in a number of places.
Vashti, right?
Vashti, correct. Meaning the story of the background story of the Megillah is that the whole of Achashverosh's entire Malchus was celebrating the end of Jewish sovereignty.
That's with all the how many parties did he have?
He had 180 days of
Yeah,
parties.
there was 180 crates of the stuff from the Beis Hamikdash.
Right, all this other
and,
Beis
and every day he opened up a new one.
V'kelim Mekelim Shanim. That's why in the Megillah we read this with a mournful tone.
Yeah.
V'kelim Mekelim Shanim. The way that the Gemara Megillah describes that Achashverosh wore the big day kahuna. He said, the Jewish people are no longer sovereign. I'm in charge. He moved his throne to Shushan because that's where he had commissioned a mock-up of Shlomo HaMelech's throne. That's what he built there. Meaning all of that is the undercurrent.
He got hurt by it or something.
Right. By the original. And then he wanted
yeah. Okay.
and he wanted a replica built. So they built him a replica of Shlomo HaMelech's throne. I mean, this was
story went all the way. There's like a Viking saga story of like one Viking petty king who kills another one, takes his head, heckles it, has it on his head, and there's like a prophecy that the other king was going to kill him. He's like, but I've killed him. He mounts his horse. The tooth of the skull gashes him in the leg as he's jumping on the horse, gets infected, he dies from it. So the other king did end up killing him. If only the throne did that.
right. So Achashverosh does not end up dead at the end of the Megillah, which is important because one of the reasons the Gemara Megillah says, yes, one of the reasons the Gemara tells us that we don't say Hallel on Purim is because the pasuk says in Hallel, Hallelu Avdei Hashem. Right? Praise, O ye servants of God. And the Gemara says, Va'akati Avdei Achashverosh. Oh no. We were still slaves of Achashverosh. We were still under Persian control. We did not ever vanquish Persia.
Who did the Greeks?
The Greeks conquered the Persians to a certain extent. But the truth is, not really. Even during the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire still existed.
Oh, and it was the effective rifle, and they never were able to touch it.
Right.
And Rome lost more to the Persians than the Persians did to Rome.
Right.
The Persians didn't invade.
Meaning those two Malchios we haven't quite finished with, which is why the Maharal writes that at the end of time we will have 2 kingdoms still to deal with. One will be Persia, and one will be Edom, and those will. The Maharal writes, we have seen already this developing into Christianity and Islam. That Persia will be the seat of Islam. Maharal writes this in the 1500s. Persia will be the seat of Islam, and Edom will be Christianity.
I will tell it to Christians.
Yeah.
Well, try telling that to Sunnis.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Although those
So-
are not
so
the
you
ones we have
really
the problem.
direct it to the chat.
Strictly speaking, those are not the ones that we have the problems with. Although Hamas is Sunni, so
Yeah.
but they were bought by the
From what I've
Shiites.
read, they're more like lefty crypto-fascist
Mm.
nationalists than they are really religious.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Say more of those words.
yeah.
What are you writing in a New York Times article? What's going on here?
Unironically, those terms apply.
Yeah. So what's the jumping over? What's going on here? So he says like this.
Okay, that's it.
So he says this. Getting through the text is important because then it gives you enough things to think about to schmooze afterwards.
Standards, yeah.
So he says, to your question, says V'sham ha'isa de legas ha'kedusha v'sher al ha'pesach v'omedes sham lefi sha'a. On the Jewish homes, that's where the presence of Hashem is going to rest temporarily, just for a moment, while everything else is going on. He says, "Ad shibir ois ha'mashris es ha'kedusha sher sham ha'yasar v'loi ha'yakarim." So that when the destruction is washing over Egypt, that the Jewish people will be protected because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there protecting them. She says, "Acha kol b'dilukaya," but it was temporary. V'loi amda harbe mipnei roiv hatuma shayis Hashem, but it did not last there a long time because of the great tumah that was there. She says, "Ki terem tavin v'teida b'davar kfar avra misham ha'kedusha v'loi teheneh mimena," because the moment that you notice, whoa, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is here, it's gone. It was like a moment in time. And now, we should just point out, just side note, is what generates the temporary capacity, so to speak, for the Kedusha to be there, was because the Jewish people had killed the Egyptian god. Meaning, here's a place that we are protesting the Avodah Zarah. So in the place where you can protest the Avodah Zarah, Kedusha can be there. Temporarily. There's a lot of Avodah Zarah going on here. Right? There's a tremendous amount of Avodah Zarah going on, but we're going to protest the Avodah Zarah. So here's a place that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can be.
What I don't understand offhand about this framing is how is this distinguished from a limitation on God? Because the way it's being described makes it sound like God cannot be benighted, but obviously that's not the case. So I'm just trying to understand.
So we'll explain as follows.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to speak with the Ran.
Dignity.
So it's not so much it's a question of dignity, although sometimes that is a piece of it. Is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that something bad is going to happen, meaning there's a gzera, something terrible is going to happen. So once there is a unleashing of a force of negativity against the world, that now becomes the natural order of events, meaning there is destruction that is occurring. To be saved from that destruction means suspending that natural order of events. And that suspension of those events requires a personal relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where Hashem is going to intervene on your behalf in a direct manner. So, for example, these things, you have a situation where, a plane is crashing, right? It happens from time to time. I mean, it's a gzerim in the Shemayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says this plane is going to crash, and the plane is plummeting to the ground. Somehow or another, 3 people walk out unscathed. Unlikely, right? How does that occur? Somehow or another, HaKadosh Baruch Hu intervenes on their behalf. Meaning, the natural order of Makas B'charis is that all firstborns die. That's what's going to happen now. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has unleashed this particular reality on the world. If you have chosen at that point in time to appeal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to say, please protect me from this thing that is now happening, so then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, okay, I'll be there for you.
Were there Jews who did not?
Yes.
And they're part of Max Strauss?
Medrash says that there were those that died in Yeah. So Rashi, only 1/5 of the Jewish people came out of Mitzrayim.
Okay, so I'm quoting Rashi.
Right.
Okay.
Rashi is quoting a medrash that has a number of different opinions. The word v'chamushim means armed, literally. That's what it means. It means that they were armed. They came out with weapons. Rashi says that it means that only 1/5 came out, which is what's pshat in that pasuk. Like, it doesn't mean armed. It doesn't mean 1/5.
It's remez more.
So it's a drasha. It's a drasha in the pasuk that the just pshat of the pasuk. The Ibn Ezra gets very upset with Rashi. He says, "What are you doing, killing off 80% of the Jewish people?" Pasuk doesn't say that 80% of the Jewish people died. But so figuring out what pshat is in that Rashi is a separate question, maybe for another time. But it's very clear. It's very clear that there were Jews that didn't come out of Mitzrayim. That we know for sure. And we reference this every year at the Seder.
Did they refute their Jewishness?
Yeah, we tell the wicked son at the Seder. What do we say to him? If you would have been there, you wouldn't have been redeemed. Why? Because what's he questioning?
Very essence of the Seder and its relevance.
Specifically, Maha Avodah Hazos Lachem. What is this service? The service specifically that he's talking about is the Korban Pesach. He says, why are we doing this Korban Pesach thing? So we tell him, this is pshat in the Haggadah. The simple reading of the Haggadah is we say to this kid, by the way,
You wouldn't have made it.
if you would have questioned it there, you wouldn't have come out. Right? Meaning, if you didn't bring Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim, you didn't leave Mitzrayim. That was your ticket out, right? That was punch a card. That was how you got out of Mitzrayim. If you questioned it in Mitzrayim, you wouldn't have come out. That's what we're telling him. We're like, you're welcome. You're entitled to your questions. Just know some questions can kill you. You can ask it. You're more than welcome to. We're not discouraging it, but we're saying you should know that this is what happened. You want to know why we're bringing this now, or generations later? Why we bring Korban Pesach? So, because that was our ticket out.
Is the distinction that if you were to ask that question, then you're spitting in the face of what's very obviously before you, and so it's indicative of like you're just asking questions.
No.
No, it's like
versus
if
the
you're-
actual ignorance or the actual curiosity unto itself. is
So,
enough.
well, it's not so much the intellectual curiosity as much as it is I'm not sure it's such a good idea to murder the Egyptian god in front of the Egyptians and declare my fealty to this invisible god that I don't see. I'm not going to do that. Okay, you're welcome to not do that, but also know that.
And my point was just this is answering the question that there's more to it than the mere asking of a question.
Sure.
And, which is in line with
Right.
all the vibes I know to be in place. Nonetheless,
Right.
wanted to
It's
confirm.
the action.
Right, meaning, and that's the pshat.
inaction.
Yeah, they're just asking questions.
So he says like this. He says, everything was skipped up. Okay. He says, but this is going to be different in the future. This will not be the case in the future.
I apologize.
No problem. He says, because of this, we left Egypt in a hurry. Everything about leaving Egypt was a hurry. Bake your matzahs in a hurry. Eat your Korban Pesach in a hurry. Right? Pack your bags. Tie your belt. Make sure. The pasuk says, you have to have your stick in your hand, your shoes on. You're not chilling. You're there.
Wouldn't it have been more powerful to like leave slowly? It's like we're not afraid of you.
Yes, but we were afraid.
We were.
That's the
Even
point.
Even with the
So he's saying, you were rushed out of Mitzrayim because HaKadosh Baruch Hu was a rescue mission. Drop in, drop out. That was it. Like we were evacuated from Mitzrayim. He says, but the Navi says in Yeshaya Nun Beis, when the final redemption will happen, the pasuk says, "Ki loy b'chipazon tetzeu." You will not leave in a hurry. And you will not leave in a rush, because Hashem will walk before you. Because Baruch Hu is not going to just drop in and pull you out. It's not going to be midaleg al ha'arim. It's going to be something else. He says, Holech, Hashem is going to walk with you, v'lo over, and not just pass over. says Vechein Kosuv, and this is what the pasuk says. Mi ze ba mi Edom. Pasuk says there in Yeshaya, Mi ze ba mi Edom chamutz begadim. Who is this that is arriving from Edom? He's arriving. Because Baruch Hu is not, hopping over, dropping over. He's arriving. He's coming. He's announcing with immense strength. He says, "Ki atikun ye gadol v'shivrin hatuma shivrin shalim." Because at that point in time, the tikkun will be great, and the destruction of Tuma will be total. It won't be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to drop in because it's so tummy here. Let's just get the Jewish people out and leave the Tuma behind. No, there'll be a total annihilation of the Tuma. Like the forces of evil will dissipate. Because the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to be walking ahead of us. Meaning, there is a order of magnitude difference between Yetzias Mitzrayim and the future redemption. And all of the forces of the world will bow before the ultimate master, meaning before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we'll explain this in a minute. He says, "V'alkein lo yeh b'chipazayin." There will not be a rush. V'zeh b'schir, and that will be at the time of Zechir. Now, we should point out that, and this is the Rambam at the beginning of Hilchos Avodah Zarah, that all Avodah Zarah is a delusion of assuming that something else is in charge of my life, and that thing does not report to Hashem. There are many, 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 many forces that act on us at all points in time. Lots of forces. There's emotional forces, and there's economic forces, and there's political forces, geopolitical forces. There's everything to do with geometry and geology and astronomy and astrology. We are acted upon by lots and lots and lots of things. People that become big experts in specific things learn to, and we'll just talk about it from the perspective of science for a moment, learn to, or at least attempt to, control those certain things. If I know enough, if I understand enough, then I can try to control that thing a little bit. But whatever the thing is that you believe is fundamentally, primarily in charge of your life, that is what you perceive as God, the thing that is fundamentally in charge of your life. And people have lots of different varieties of that. It could be an amalgamation of things, but everybody believes that things are in control of their lives. All of that is Avodah Zarah. Now, it's not the Avodah Zarah of bowing down to an idol and offering incense and slaughtering animals, but working in service of a thing that you believe has power over you, independent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is Avodah Zarah. As opposed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu acts through all of these forces. The tumah that exists in the world today is a deep delusion that other forces act independently of Ratzon Hashem. That's called Avodah Zarah. That somehow or another HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not in charge of what's happening in American politics. If it's possible, I don't know, maybe a few years ago it was not as obvious. It is like legit the most obvious thing in the world right now. Like, there's nobody in the world that wanted to see another rematch between these two old dudes. No one. No one wants
Not
it.
a single person.
No one. And yet, no one can stop it. It's like, it's a freight train. It's impossible. It's like all of the systems that exist have led to this disastrous moment in the past, present, and future of America. All of us have led to this. And the pastor says, Yoshev Bashamayim Yisrael, the Rebbeinu Shalom is giggling. It's like, everybody's like, no, it can't be. It's impossible. Kacha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is it. How? I don't know. All of the possibilities that this is what,
We don't deserve better.
whatever it means.
Do you know that H.L. Mencken quote? Democracy is the idea that the people deserve to get what they want and to get it good and hard.
Yeah. Kacha. I'm saying all of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is finagling with all of this, pulling all of the strings. That all of the kochas that are acting on us are all coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The total vanquishing of Tumah is the complete and utter annihilation of the delusion. That all the forces are simply HaKadosh Baruch Hu acting in the world.
Do all the Jews have to believe that, or all the world?
No, it will become obvious. Bayoma hu yeh Hashem echad u'shma echad. It's going to happen that everybody's going to be like, all right, we understand. Meaning that will be the total victory. Bayoma hu yeh Hashem echad u'shma echad. There will be a unity of the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu
So I'm sure we.
and a unity of the Rebbeinu Shalom.
What are they gonna
All of
call
them. Yud Kei Vav Kei, probably.
I'm sure we talked
Are we gonna
about
pronounce
that.
it?
Don't know.
But then what happens to free choice?
Of course, there's free choice.
But if everyone knows without a doubt that that this is the truth,
Have you read the Torah?
So
you know,
we've made this point before that even when we're not doing Averas, there's still infinite growth that's possible and choices to make within that. So Rav Dessler speaks about this extensively, this idea of the Nekudas HaBechira. That before we can talk about free choice in general, we should note that our freedom of choice, while we as Jews absolutely believe that we have freedom of choice, we're not biologically deterministic. We don't believe that we are all pre-programmed to say and do all the things that we do, meaning we experience freedom of choice. But Rav Dessler points out that even within our experience of freedom of choice, we experience more than we probably have. Meaning, there's many more things that we don't actually choose than what we do choose. Practically speaking, the stage is set for us. Like the vast majority of variables that determine your life are set before you even enter into this world. Most of those variables are already preset, right?
Even within the field of things that develop in your life in your adulthood,
Right.
do you choose to love your children?
So,
Or is it so obvious and inherent? And yeah, there are people who deviate. We're not talking about them. We're talking about people in this room. Did you make a choice to love your children? Or is it so obvious?
So even with, so we'll talk about where the choice exists. So the choice exists, what Rav Dessler refers to as the Nekudas HaBechira, and Rav Dessler became famous for this idea. This is the very beginning of the Michla Melial. He explains that every person has choices, but within a certain range, meaning there's a threshold below which you don't have choices anymore. And there's a threshold above which you can't even conceive of those choices. So, for example, talk about somebody, it's easy to talk about this in terms of like a Baal Tshuva, right? So you have somebody that didn't keep any mitzvahs at any point in time, at all. At some point in time, they begin keeping Shabbos. So at the point in time that they begin keeping Shabbos, Shabbos is a big struggle. It's difficult. Every aspect of is to imagine myself violating that. Like how could I do that? At some point in time, you don't really have a choice to break Shabbos. You're not going to. You're not making that choice. Now, do you theoretically, fundamentally still have the choice to do so? Yes. But that choice is...
You don't have a reason to do it anymore.
Right.
I mean, at the beginning, you had what you've known is like to do those things.
Right. So your Nekudas HaBechira, your point of choice, has now moved up. Right? Like you have somebody that decides that they've been somebody that's been smoking for 20 years, decides that they're going to quit smoking. So the first day that they called Turkey, right? The first day that they decide they're not smoking anymore, all of the urges and all of the desire, they have to force themselves 1,000 times a day not to pick up a cigarette. All of the urges are drawing them to that thing. Then a week goes by, and a month goes by, and a year goes by, and 30 years goes by, and it becomes inconceivable that they would ever smoke again. They know that they could, but they won't. It's not a choice anymore. The Nekudas HaBechira has moved up. So at the point in time that our Nekudas HaBechira will be upgraded to the point that everybody will love their children, but how that love manifests and what you do with that, those will still be choices of growing and growing and growing. Because as HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinite, our ability to ascend is infinite. Our ability to become more honed and more perfect and greater, meaning that ascends.
You're saying like our choices aren't really binary. It's more the spectrum.
Everything is, yeah.
And then the spectrum is not just left and right. It's up and down everything. There's so many. It's infinite.
Right. And that's why I'm speaking about this extensively.
What?
No, but this why I'm speaking about this extensively. So I'll explain what Reb Noach is mentioning here, because this is kedai to understand, is that Beis Yaakov writes us in Beis Yaakov Geulah in Parashat Eschanan that the extremity of, for example, lo tirtzach, do not murder. Meaning, the extremity of that is obviously don't murder a human being. Don't do that thing. But there is an enormous spectrum. It's not either I murder people or I don't murder people. I don't murder people. That's because that's not okay. But Chazal tell us that anybody that embarrasses their friend in public is as if they murdered. What does that mean? It means that on the spectrum of good guy to murderer, there is a stop along the way called embarrassing somebody. That's also part of that story. And on the flip side of it, can you fight against that? So the flip side of that spectrum is a person being somebody that is attempting to generate life. Somebody that is saving lives, that is enhancing lives, that is bringing chiyus, that's bringing life to other people. Meaning, the extreme of lo tirtzach is do not be a person that is controlling and cruel and vindictive. What should you be? Somebody that is kind and generous and loving and forthcoming and extroverted and positive, all of those things. The flip side of that, of course, is lo sinah, do not commit adultery. Right? Do not commit adultery means don't sleep with somebody that you're not allowed to sleep with. But in halacha, as we know, there are many, 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 many gradations of that, which is don't be alone with somebody that you're not supposed to be in a room with. Don't develop a deep emotional relationship with somebody that you're not supposed to have a sexual relationship with. Don't be alone with them. Don't flirt with them. Don't look at them in that way. Which means lo sinah is effectively curtailing midas hachesed. And the extreme of lo sinah, do not commit adultery, is be a reserved, disciplined, diligent human being. Be exacting, be midas hagvura, which means that the extremity of lo tirtzach, don't murder, is be the biggest bal chesed in the world. No gevura. No gevura, just be a big bal chesed, the most loving, caring, wonderful person. But the extremity of lo sinah is don't commit adultery. Okay, so curtail your extroverted emotional responses. Be a person that is stoic and disciplined and unemotional and not forthcoming and loving and friendly, go to the opposite extreme because everything is on a spectrum. These two things are inherently contradictory, right? These two extremes. So
The flip side.
right. So the Beis Yaakov says that that's why the first luchas couldn't survive. The first tablets, they had to be broken. It says they couldn't survive in this world because the Torah says, by the first luchas, it says, Lo sirtzach, don't murder, lo sinaf, don't commit adultery. So the second luchas has a vav in between. Lo sirtzach, don't murder, v'lo sinaf. And also don't commit adultery, meaning it's the balance between those two. You need to have because you can't live on two polar extremes simultaneously. That is absurd. That is mathematically, fundamentally, theologically impossible. You cannot be the extreme of chesed and the extreme of gvura simultaneously.
There's plenty of people who commit adultery and then murder people right after.
We're
Yes.
talking about the other side, the extremes.
So it is possible. It is possible to violate both.
Or to catch people doing adultery and then.
It is possible to violate both of those things. There are various possible,
Okay.
but the extremities of the positivity,
The positives.
you cannot be totally chesed and totally gvura at the same time.
You're thinking of it like an X. Think of it more like a V. At the point where it comes together, you can be a murdering adulterer, wonderful, fun, and make a Netflix original about you. But going away from the murder and the adultery at the same time in either direction pulls you in two separate directions to figure out.
Right. That you can't contain those
Chesed and gvura at the same time.
simultaneously.
The extremes of
Yeah,
the
you
extremes
can't
of
be
So-
super Hesed man where you're the warmest, most engaging possible person to everyone, including the opposite sex, while also avoiding the adultery land of impropriety. Because if you're going to be so kind, so warm, so engaging, so everything to everyone, including women, you're getting in dangerous waters for avoiding the adultery element.
So you're saying gvura in terms of just like self-discipline.
Right. Meaning,
And the whole point of if you're chesed and extroverted is the opposite of that.
correct.
Okay.
And to live at those extremes is very
The
difficult.
opposite side.
Very, very difficult to live at the opposite. Which means that there is constantly a tussle between these things, and we need to navigate them. And that navigation is an akudas of bechira. That's points of decision making routinely all the time. Meaning to the extent, and this I'll say this very practically, to the extent that when you're at work and somebody comes up to you, because this exists in the world today, and asks you a question slightly flirtatiously, then you need to figure out, well, where's the line between chesed and gvura here? Because I don't want to be rude, but I also don't want to be flirtatious. So where do I draw that line? And that's a moving target at all points in time. Now, there are people in the world that don't have that struggle on either direction. There are those that somebody will come up to them, have, one of your female coworkers at work will come up to somebody and say, hey, in a flirtatious way, can I ask you for your opinion, advice, assistance, thoughts on this thing? And you'll have a super chesed guy who'd be like, all in, right? Let's go. And then you'll have the super gvura guy who's like a jerk. Both of those people are not healthy, right? There's something in between.
Amicable autism.
Yeah, something like that.
Just you be dopey, you be overly literal, you be kind, and you be completely unsexy. Just amicable autism.
Right. But I'm saying navigating that is not simple.
If there's ever time to be awkward.
Yeah, 100%.
I've trained for this.
With a dopey smile. Yeah. Just
It's,
every time you've ever
channel-
smooth and
Channel
botched
all
it.
your worst moments of high school.
Exactly.
That's it. That's it.
But now with Lamuna and Nafas, it is
That's where it goes.
Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Yeah.
That's 100%. That's I'm saying, but those nakudos are hard. Yeah, channeling that moment, how to do that exactly.
I think that's a lot of the tests that we have day to day.
Yes. I mean, the biggest
It's like
decisions
when
in life.
God's watching you. What do you do now?
The biggest decisions in life, and I've been saying this for years, all of my Talmidim have heard me say this, the biggest decisions in life are not between right and wrong. Those are easy. Not always easy to do the right thing versus to do the wrong thing, but the decision is an easy decision. It's not, you don't feel conflicted on an intellectual level.
It's like when both decisions are technically right.
Right. The decision between right and wrong is not hard. The decision between right and right is very hard. How do you know? How do you know what's the better thing to do? And that requires navigation. And that's even in a world of Mala Aretz Dasas Hashem. The world will be filled with the knowledge of God. Well, okay, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God, but like, what does God want from me now? I'm thinking about God. What does God want from me?
They have
Right?
to center people a little bit more. Like they'll know what they'll have. The moral compass will be
Right.
established. More.
It'll be a firmly rooted,
Yeah.
pointed direction.
Like there won't be secularism.
Meaning in the sense that it'll be secularism absent of godliness. There'll be lots of what today we call secular activities. People will
Right. I'm saying like
Go to work.
anti-God sort of.
People will still work in the times of Mashiach.
depends who.
Not me.
No,
When the
Levine.
revolution-
All the
Right.
AI
What do you
robots.
say, Levine?
Yeah.
When the revolution happens, I'm going to be in charge of the poetry and like running the connection tent. Everyone else is going to be the farmer, right?
Yeah,
Right.
I'm gonna be doing all
All
the
right,
hard-
let's finish off this point because this is very good. It says, "Ach bebekida loikein," but this is not true during the Pekida now, right? Until the time where Hakadosh Baruch Hu shows up and is like, "Hey, let's do this thing." Until that time, there are still many difficult choices and many competing ideas and ideologies that people view as distinct from God. That people do not relate back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because the fixing has not yet been accomplished. It says, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu is still jumping over the mountains. There's still a diluk. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is dropping in, dropping out. This is what we call moments of inspiration. Amazing. And then out. It says, these mountains and these hilltops are the mountains of darkness. And the peaks of blackness, of darkness, of hiddenness that belong to that world of impurity. And because the Jewish people are in captivity in those places of darkness, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is dropping in there. Meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu is coming to the darkest places, showing up, and then disappearing. Feeling flash of inspiration, and then absence. And let's bring this into what we're talking about, halacha l'maaseh now. It says, now I'm going to explain this well, you're going to understand the secret. It says, Ki kama neshamas heim me'ushakos miyamim kadmonios bekitzvei haharim ha'ele. There are many souls of the Jewish people that have been rolling around in these places of darkness for a long time. There's many souls that have been stuck in dark places for a long time. Asher lo yotzu misham ad hayom hazeh, that have not exited those since a long time ago. Mipnei roiv hisgabrus hatuma hamiskaberes kenegdan, because of all of the tumah that is fighting against them, they can't get out. Bal yitnu eten latzes, they can't escape it. These are people that are trapped, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually trapped. They cannot break through their problems. They can't break through their darkness. Vehem asidos latzes term geulasenu, but they will break free before Geulah. Meaning the people that are stuck with an impossibility of seeing a world where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is relevant, where Torah is true, where Avodas Hashem is possible. All of that it's just impossible. It's impossible. None of this makes any sense. Those neshamas are freed before Geulah. It says, Ve'ich tetzena Im lo yochlu latzeis ad hayom, and how will they break free if they could not break free before? Ella sheberibois ha'or alehem bepekida tetzena. When the pekida occurs, there will be a flash of light on them, on those people in the darkest of places, that will infuse them with the capacity to make a break for it. It says, Ki az yeh midaleg hatzadik she'amarti al kol ha'arim ve'al kol ha'gvos asher nimtzu sham ha'neshamas ha'ina, because then the tzaddik HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the midas ha'yesod, will enter into the world and infuse this idea of like, I could be something, I could do something, this is possible. I can get out of this hole that I'm in. And we have these feelings from time to time. And arguably much more often than any of our ancestors ever had. We have these feelings of like, I'm going to do something. And I don't think that was something that people experienced regularly in previous generations. This constant reoccurring of like, I'm going to reinvent myself. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to make something of myself. This inner desire to do, to build, to create, to escape, to... You see something fascinating in the world today that never existed before, which is people changing their careers like dozens of times. People moving locations throughout their lives. Most people, and we're not even talking about like the ease of transport and the ease of moving. That's supported by the deep desire for people to be constantly evolving and changing. People are stuck and they want to get free and they want to break free and they want to move something, they want to do something. This feeling stuck is something that is brand flashes of lightning, of inspiration. And on a spiritual level, Jews that historically were just down in the dumps in terms of ruchnis, in terms of spirituality, in terms of Avodas Hashem, in terms of mitzvahs, all of a sudden just breaking free. And by the way, this is everything that we've seen with Israelis, with Americans, with Jews all throughout the world since October 7th. It's an unbelievable thing. Something terrible happened to the Jewish people. And all of a sudden, Jews with tattoos are putting on tefillin. Where's the logic? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. For most people, that would be the excuse to say, I'm done with this thing. This religion is not for me. I'm out. That has overwhelmingly not been the response of the Jewish people.
We're in a different position now. Like after the Holocaust, like there's a lot of people who just cast off
Yes.
everything, and
There were many that kept it,
right,
but many that couldn't cope with it anymore.
right.
But this world of, I'll say that, this world of people escaping.
It's not just for Jews too. Like what
Correct.
you're describing is a lot of the entrepreneurial world
Yes.
that I see and many Christians people I see. There's literally a podcast that I was on called Unstuck Movement.
Yes. But this is it.
And then I had 2 conversations recently about people literally like just giving up to God and being like, where am I moving now? What am I doing now? And then like God just moves them in that direction.
So what the Ramchal is saying is that this pekida is now infusing the world. The Jewish people are at the forefront of it on a national level, but it affects the whole world. It affects the entirety of existence. Because kacha, that's what it has to
When
be.
did this start?
It's a good question. The Zohar says that it started in 1840.
What was 1840?
Industrial Revolution.
So yeah, that's when the Zohar says that the pasuk in Parshas Noach, right?
Oh.
Parshas Noach, that in the 600th year will be Nivku Kol Mayanas Tehom Rabbah, will be the explosion of all of the waters of the deep. So the Zohar says that all of the well springs of heaven and earth will open up in the 600th year of the 6th millennium, meaning the year 5400, which is 1840.
They predicted that before it happened.
That's in the Zohar, yeah, from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, from Days of the Tanaim.
Can we read the Zohar?
Yes.
That's what I'm wearing.
And then you turn 40.
Yeah, by the way, the Ramchal, everything that Ramchal is saying
All
to us
from
is
Zohar.
still from the Zohar and the Kisari Yisrael. So he says, "Haneshamos are and when the Pekida happens, these neshamas will take tremendous light from that. And with that strength, they're going to leave. It says, but that inspiration is momentary. It's transient. HaKadosh Baruch Hu drops into those places of immense darkness and tumah, and then checks out. It says, because when the klipa feels that there's this presence, then it disappears. Which is why you feel inspiration, and then a moment after you feel that inspiration, you feel all the reasons not to do it. Right? I'm inspired, and that inspiration will last for a day, a week, and then if you don't do something about it right then and there, what happens?
One of two things. Either you realize it's not a good idea, or two, you can't get it out of your head, and then you realize it's something you have to act on.
But until you act on it, you will have immense opposition against it.
Most people.
That's the klipa. That's meaning the moment that battle then goes on between the person that has been inspired and the negativity that is pushing them away from it. Somebody says, I've decided I want to finish Shas. Good. Mazel tov. You want to finish Shas. If you don't pick up a Gemara that day, you're not starting. If you're not starting, you're not finishing. There are 1,000 reasons not to finish. But there's a billion reasons not to start. And you feel something, I'm going to do something. Unless you do something, or Tzaddik says at the beginning of Tzidkas of Tzaddik, is that when that feeling to do something occurs, if you don't act on it, it goes. That window closes because the inspiration fades. When inspiration occurs, you have to act on it. He says, V'teidu, you need to know. He says, these neshamas are the neshamas of the generation of Mashiach. These neshamas that are stuck in the mud. This is what the Zohar refers to as the neshamas of the Olam HaTayhu. Shav Kook has a whole countryside. That the neshamas of the world of Tayhu, of emptiness. People that are stuck, that all of a sudden break free. He says, B'nei Darish HaMashiach. He says, Kfar yadat alam nikra b'nei hadar b'neshamas. And you know why these are called these neshamas, the dar of Mashiach. He says, Ach neshamas gam ken acheres gedolos me'oy tetzena min hazman hahu. But there are other big neshamas. To prepare the world for it. So there's a lot that's going on. There's neshamas that need to illuminate the world, and there's the neshamas of the world of Mashiach that need to be redeemed in the world of Mashiach. But B'kitzer, what the Ramchal has told us in this Nekuda is explaining on a very deep and profound level why it is that inspiration is fleeting and temporary, and that when the Zechira, final Geulah, is going to occur, inspiration will be something that we feel constantly. And then at those points in time, we will ascend with Bechira. As opposed to deciding whether or not we're going to pick up the Gemara or not pick up the Gemara. Whether we're going to make it daven or not make it daven, whether we're going to daven the Kavanah or not daven the Kavanah. As opposed to the decisions of, good and bad, which we struggle with. Even though we know the answer, we will be debating between good and better. And that's a different world. And B'Hashem Yisparach, we will continue in 2 weeks' time. I think next week, Monday night, is the Hillel dinner. So, B'Hashem Yisparach, to be continued. And Chodesh Tov.